Modern babies cry at night. They cry when hungry. They cry when tired. They cry for reasons no parent can figure out at 3 in the morning for no clear reason at all. But ancient babies cried far less. Why? Here's the obvious guess. Maybe ancient babies were just calmer, born with a different temperament suited to a harsher world. Wrong. A baby's brain today is essentially identical to a baby's brain 40,000 years ago, down to the same reflexes, the same wiring, the same basic needs. Nothing about the crying reflex itself has changed in all that time. So if the baby hasn't changed in 40,000 years, something else has. Here's the twist. It's not that ancient babies never cried, it's that they almost never needed to. Picture a modern nursery, a crib in its own room, down a hallway, behind a closed door, painted in soft colors and stocked with everything a baby could physically need. A baby wakes alone, in the dark, in perfect silence, and the only tool it has to summon help is its voice, carried through walls and down a hallway to someone who may or may not hear it right away. Now, picture an ancient infant instead, wrapped against a mother's chest or sleeping skin to skin beside her on a shared sleeping surface, close enough to feel every breath, every heartbeat, every small shift in position, all night long, with no wall, no hallway, and no door standing between them. That baby wakes up too, at the same hour, for the same biological reasons. But it doesn't wake up alone, and that single difference changes everything that happens next. Wait. So the crying itself isn't the difference. The distance is. A baby's cry didn't evolve as random noise, and it definitely wasn't designed as a nuisance aimed at exhausting new parents. It evolved as an alarm system, built for one specific job: getting an absent caregiver to return, fast before something in the dark finds an unprotected infant first. Every part of that sound, the pitch, the urgency, the way it cuts through sleep instantly, was shaped by exactly one pressure: survival in an environment where being left alone could genuinely mean death. If a caregiver is already right there, that alarm never needs to fire. The whole system stays quiet because the emergency it was built for never actually starts. It's not that the alarm gets turned off, it simply never has a reason to switch on in the first place. Here's something that should surprise you. For most of human history, infants were almost never alone, day or night, for even a few minutes at a time. They were carried while mothers gathered food, foraged, or traveled between camps. They were passed between relatives while someone else worked, cooked, or hunted nearby. They slept pressed against a parent's body, not because anyone had a parenting philosophy about it, but because a baby left alone, even briefly, was a baby at serious immediate risk from cold, from predators, from simply being forgotten in the chaos of daily survival. Separate rooms for infants are not ancient at all, whatever it might feel like today. Cribs in their own nurseries are a surprisingly recent invention, only a few centuries old at most, tied to changes in housing, wealth, and ideas about independence that would have made zero sense to anyone living 10,000 years earlier. In a world where a wall between a parent and a child was, quite literally, a wall between safety and danger. Now flip that idea upside down, because here's what almost nobody considers. Constant closeness didn't just prevent crying, it solved several problems at once, all quietly, all without anyone planning it that way. A baby held constantly could feed whenever it needed to. Not on a clock, not on a schedule someone else invented, but the instant hunger appeared, often before it built up enough to trigger real distress in the first place. A baby sleeping against a caregiver stayed warmer through cold nights without blankets that could smother or slip loose. A baby carried everywhere absorbed the rhythm of walking, working, even breathing, which many researchers believe helped regulate its own nervous system long before it could do that on its own. And a baby kept close was also a baby who could be soothed the instant discomfort started, rather than left to build toward genuine panic before anyone even noticed. One arrangement, multiple problems solved, quietly, without a single deliberate decision behind any of it, simply because closeness was the only option anyone had. Here's a scene worth sitting with. Imagine a mother waking in the middle of the night, not to screaming, not to panic, but to the faintest stirring against her chest. A small shift, a soft sound, barely audible, even in a silent room. She responds before it becomes anything louder, adjusting an arm, murmuring something wordless, settling back into sleep almost immediately herself. The baby barely finishes waking, up before it's already being soothed, before the alarm has any chance to escalate into something both of them would remember in the morning. Multiply that by every night for months across an entire infancy, and you get a baby whose most powerful alarm system almost never gets tested simply because the threat it was designed to detect, being alone, unprotected, unheard, never actually happens. Here's the part that changes the whole picture. Modern babies aren't more difficult, more sensitive, or somehow more broken than infants from thousands of years ago. Their brains, their instincts, their entire wiring is essentially unchanged. They're crying into a gap that almost never used to exist: a separate room, a closed door. Minutes of distance between a cry and a response that, for nearly all of human history, simply weren't there to begin with. That's not a parenting failure, and it's certainly not a reflection of a difficult baby. That's a mismatch between an ancient alarm system tuned over tens of thousands of years and a genuinely new environment it was never built to handle, one that appeared far too recently for evolution to have caught up with it yet. And it explains something that still confuses parents constantly today. Why does a crying baby often go silent almost instantly the moment it's picked up, before any actual need has even been addressed, before a diaper is checked or a bottle is warmed? Because the alarm was never really about hunger, or a wet diaper, or any specific fixable problem in that exact second. It was about proximity. The moment proximity returns, the alarm has already done its job, and the crying can simply stop. Here's something stranger still. In cultures today where infants are still carried constantly, worn against a caregiver's body for most of the day rather than placed down in a separate space, researchers studying infant crying patterns have found dramatically shorter, quieter crying episodes compared to cultures with more physical separation between infant and caregiver. The behavior isn't fixed by biology alone, unchangeable no matter what. It shifts visibly and measurably based almost entirely on how far away help usually is. The silence in an ancient camp at night wasn't the result of easier babies, calmer temperaments, or some kind of primitive toughness modern infants have somehow lost. It was the result of an alarm system that almost never had a reason to go off, because the one thing it was built to summon was already right there the whole time, breathing quietly, close enough to touch without even fully waking up. So, here's the real takeaway. Bigger than the question I opened with, the modern crying baby isn't a broken version of an ancient one, malfunctioning for reasons nobody can quite pin down. It's an ancient alarm system, completely unchanged after tens of thousands of years, going off correctly, exactly as designed, every single time, inside a world that quietly removed the one thing that used to make it unnecessary in the first place. The wiring didn't fail. The environment around it changed faster than biology ever could. Not a difficult baby. An ancient signal, still working exactly as designed, echoing down a hallway it was never built to cross, waiting, the same way it always has for someone to simply come close enough to make the alarm stop mattering.